What if I told you that some people you think are harmless to visit could actually shorten your lifespan as you get older? Who are they? Stick with me to find out. As we get older, our time and energy become more precious than ever. Every moment matters, and the people we spend time with can have a major impact on our health, peace of mind, and overall well-being. You might think that a friendly visit to anyone is harmless, but there are certain types of people whose presence can drain you in ways you might not even realize. In this video, we're going to talk about the 5 types of people you should avoid visiting, no matter how free you are, because their influence could affect your health and happiness more than you think. Let's dive in. Section 1. The Complainer, the Energy Vampire. Let me tell you a story about my friend, Mrs. Tiaz Thompson. She's in her late 70s, and for as long as I've known her, she's been the type of person who sees the glass as half empty. Every time I visit her, it's like a floodgate of complaints opens up. "The weather's too cold," she says. "My joints ache more than ever." Or, "I'm too old for this nonsense." No matter what you try to say to lift her spirits, it's like her mind is locked into a perpetual state of negativity. She doesn't seem to see the good in anything, and it's draining. What once started as a short chat over tea has turned into a long, exhausting listening session where I'm the one doing all the emotional labor. But the worst part? By the end of my visit, I'm left feeling just as tired and discouraged as she is. It's easy to dismiss these complaints as harmless or simply a part of aging. But constant exposure to negativity can actually increase your stress levels, which takes a significant toll on your mental and physical health. When we're around someone who complains all the time, we unconsciously start to absorb their negative energy. Studies show that stress has a profound impact on the body, affecting everything from blood pressure to immune function. Being around constant negativity triggers our body's fight-or-flight response, making us feel tense and anxious. For older adults, this can lead to an increased risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and even depression. Have you ever left a conversation with someone who complains non-stop only to realize you're more stressed than when you walked in? That's because it's not just the words that impact us, it's the emotional energy that gets transferred. You might find yourself ruminating on what they said, carrying that heavy feeling with you long after the visit. Over time, this can make it harder to relax and feel at peace. And as we get older, it's even more critical to maintain our mental health. Chronic stress can disrupt sleep patterns, lower your ability to concentrate, and worsen existing health conditions like arthritis or diabetes. It can even contribute to mental health issues, such as anxiety or depression. That's why you should really think twice about visiting people who constantly complain. It's not that you shouldn't be empathetic or avoid helping when someone needs it, but when someone's primary focus is always on what's wrong, it becomes emotionally exhausting. Over time, that negativity can add up and start to chip away at your own health and happiness. Remember, you don't have to be someone's emotional sponge. Your well-being is just as important. So, as you get older, be mindful of the energy you're surrounded by. The more time you spend with chronic complainers, the more likely it is that their stress will rub off on you. And let's face it, who needs that extra weight when we're trying to enjoy the golden years of life? It's okay to step back from those who constantly drain your positive energy. Your peace of mind and health deserve better. Section 2. The Overly Dependable, the Emotional Leech. Let me introduce you to Mr. Johnson, a man in his 80s who's become a frequent visitor in our community. He's kind, gentle, and always has a smile on his face, but there's one thing about him that has started to drain the people around him. He's overly dependent. For years now, Mr. Johnson has relied on his friends and family for everything, from taking him to appointments to helping him with simple tasks around the house. At first, it seemed harmless. He would occasionally ask for a favor, and we'd all gladly help out. But over time, the requests grew more frequent, and it became clear that he wasn't looking for help as much as he was seeking constant attention and support. What started as a few small favors turned into a full-time job for those who were close to him. The problem with being around someone like Mr. Johnson is that there's little to no reciprocity. He's always the one asking for help, but rarely, if ever, offers anything in return. There's no sense of mutuality in the relationship. This can create an emotional imbalance where those who are always helping start to feel overwhelmed and even resentful. While caring for someone in need is important, when it becomes one-sided, it can be emotionally draining. People who constantly rely on others without offering any support can make their caregivers feel as if their own needs are ignored, and eventually, that strain starts to affect both parties. Over time, this imbalance can lead to feelings of exhaustion, especially for those who feel they're doing all the giving without getting anything in return. While it's natural to want to help a friend or loved one, constantly providing emotional or physical support without acknowledgement or reciprocity can lead to burnout. What starts as a simple act of kindness can evolve into an unhealthy dynamic, where the helper begins to feel emotionally drained. This leads to what's often referred to as emotional leaching, where one person's emotional needs continuously drain the energy of another, leaving them feeling empty and disconnected. This kind of emotional toll isn't just about the time spent helping either. It's the mental and emotional burden that builds over time. When you're constantly being relied on, it can feel like you're trapped in a cycle of caregiving without any break or release. This ongoing stress can lead to anxiety, depression, and even resentment. Over time, you may find yourself withdrawing, avoiding contact, or feeling more isolated because the constant demands have worn you out. It becomes harder to enjoy your own life when you're constantly tending to someone else's. That's why it's important to set boundaries and recognize when these relationships start to become emotionally unhealthy. While helping others is essential, especially as we age, it's equally important to ensure that the relationship is balanced. If you find yourself being the only one giving and not receiving, it might be time to step back. Surround yourself with people who understand the importance of give and take. Your emotional health depends on it, and the last thing you need in your later years is to feel emotionally drained or isolated because of an unbalanced relationship. Section 3. The Hoarder, the Cluttered Home. I remember visiting my Aunt Millie's house a few months ago, and I was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer amount of clutter. It was as though every available surface had something piled on it: old newspapers, boxes of forgotten items, stacks of clothes that hadn't been touched in years. The living room was barely navigable with little pathways carved through the mess. Aunt Millie, who had always been so lively and vibrant, seemed completely unaffected by the chaos around her. But as I stepped over a pile of magazines to reach her, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. It wasn't just uncomfortable to be in, it felt almost dangerous. I knew that if I tripped over something, a fall could easily lead to serious injury, especially as we get older. But even more disturbing was how much it seemed to be taking a toll on her mental state. Living in a cluttered space can have profound effects on both our mental and physical health. Psychologically, being surrounded by disorder can create a constant sense of stress. The visual overload and inability to find things can leave us feeling helpless, frustrated, and exhausted. In Aunt Millie's case, I could see that she wasn't even aware of how the clutter was affecting her. When I suggested she might want to clear some things out, she laughed it off, saying, "It doesn't bother me." But the reality was, her home was a constant source of low-level anxiety for her. It's been shown that a cluttered environment can heighten feelings of stress, overwhelm, and even contribute to depression, as it makes the mind feel like it's under constant pressure. Additionally, a cluttered home is a safety hazard, especially as we age. Piles of things left on the floor can cause tripping, and sharp objects left out in the open increase the risk of injury. In Aunt Millie's home, there were boxes stacked precariously in the hallway, making it almost impossible to walk without navigating through tight spaces. This poses a huge danger for older adults, who are more prone to losing their balance or having difficulty moving quickly enough to prevent falls. And if a fall does happen, the consequences can be severe, leading to fractures or even hospitalization. These accidents can take a long time to recover from and can drastically reduce one's mobility and independence. But beyond the physical risks, a cluttered environment can impact our emotional well-being in more subtle ways. Just think about how you feel when you walk into a clean, organized room versus a cluttered, disorganized one. A cluttered space can make you feel overwhelmed, exhausted, and even depressed. It's like your surroundings are constantly reminding you of unfinished tasks and unresolved issues. This can increase feelings of frustration and anxiety. As we get older, it's especially important to nurture our mental health, and part of that is creating an environment that fosters peace and clarity. That's why it's crucial to avoid spending too much time in cluttered spaces. While some people may argue that they're just fine with their piles of things, it's important to recognize the impact it has on both our mental and physical health. The mess might seem manageable at first, but over time, the stress and risks it introduces can compound. So, when visiting someone like Aunt Millie, it's important to gently encourage them to clean up or find ways to simplify their space. If they're unwilling or unable, it's best to limit the time you spend in that environment. Protecting your health and well-being should always come first, and that includes the spaces you choose to spend your time in. Section 4. The Pessimist, the nothing will ever change person. I have an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Blackwell, who has always been a good friend, but lately her constant negativity has been hard to ignore. Every time I visit her, she tells me how there's no point in trying or nothing ever changes, so why bother? A few weeks ago, I suggested that she join a local fitness class to improve her mobility and energy levels, but she just sighed and said, "What's the use? I'm too old for that and nothing will ever change." This mindset is something I've noticed more frequently in some older people, and it's incredibly discouraging. Her response left me feeling deflated, as though trying to inspire her was an exercise in futility. But what struck me the most was how much her pessimism seemed to have taken over every aspect of her life. Pessimism, particularly in older age, can be incredibly limiting. When someone views life through a lens of hopelessness, they often give up on things that could improve their health, well-being, and quality of life. In Mrs. Blackwell's case, her refusal to try new things or embrace potential opportunities means she's missing out on simple pleasures that could bring joy, connection, and even improvement to her physical health. Whether it's participating in a hobby, trying a new recipe, or even just going for a daily walk, pessimism can hold you back from making positive changes. It creates a cycle where the belief that nothing will ever change becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Without taking action, the chances for change are slim, and this belief further discourages one from making the effort. Beyond the missed opportunities for growth, pessimism can also lead to poor lifestyle choices. When you believe that nothing will improve, you may stop taking care of yourself altogether. Mrs. Blackwell, for example, often opts for unhealthy foods, doesn't get enough exercise, and isolates herself from others because she believes that doing so won't make any difference in the end. This mindset can have long-term consequences, leading to poor health and a diminished quality of life. It's like an invisible weight that holds her back from making the changes necessary for a better future. When you stop believing that positive changes are possible, it becomes easy to neglect your physical and emotional well-being. The emotional toll of spending time with someone like Mrs. Blackwell can also be heavy. Constant exposure to pessimism can leave you feeling drained and discouraged. After visiting her, I sometimes find myself questioning whether I should keep suggesting new things or just accept her outlook as the norm. But the truth is, being around someone who constantly doubts or dismisses possibilities can start to affect your own perspective. It can create a mental fog, making you feel more negative about your own life and the world around you. When you constantly hear that nothing will ever change, it can slowly seep into your own mindset, causing you to stop pursuing your own dreams and goals. That's why it's essential to be mindful of the company you keep, especially as you get older. Pessimism may be a natural response to life's challenges, but it can be contagious. If you find yourself surrounded by people who constantly undermine hope and progress, it can diminish your own enthusiasm for life. It's not about abandoning those who are struggling, but rather protecting your own emotional and mental well-being. You deserve to be surrounded by individuals who inspire growth, positivity, and hope. If you're constantly immersed in negativity, it becomes much harder to stay motivated or optimistic about your own future. Life is full of opportunities for joy and change, but only if you're open to embracing them. Section 5. The toxic family member, the manipulator or narcissist. Let me tell you about my cousin Claire. She's one of those family members who has a way of always making everything about herself. No matter what the conversation is, somehow it always circles back to her. Last summer, we had a family gathering to celebrate my grandmother's 80th birthday. Instead of focusing on the occasion, Claire managed to turn the spotlight onto her own recent promotion at work, claiming that everyone should be more excited for her success. She even went as far as to say, "If you were all as supportive as I needed, maybe I'd feel more appreciated." It was uncomfortable for everyone, but no one wanted to confront her. This kind of behavior wasn't new. Claire frequently uses guilt to manipulate situations, and she knows exactly how to make others feel as if they owe her something. Toxic family members like Claire can be incredibly draining. Over time, their manipulative behavior eats away at your peace of mind. You might begin to second-guess yourself or feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite sure when they'll turn the situation into something that revolves around their needs. These individuals have a way of making you feel guilty for simply existing, as though your accomplishments or needs are irrelevant compared to theirs. When Claire spoke about her promotion, it wasn't just about celebrating her success. It was a calculated move to make everyone else feel small and insignificant. The guilt-tripping and constant need for validation can leave you emotionally exhausted, creating a toxic dynamic that's difficult to break free from. This type of manipulation can also cause confusion. One moment, you might feel loved and valued by a family member, but the next, you're caught in a whirlwind of guilt and self-doubt. Toxic family members often use the closeness of the family bond to manipulate others into thinking they should be putting the family member's needs first, no matter the cost. With someone like Claire, it's easy to get lost in the chaos she creates. You start questioning your own worth, wondering if you're doing enough, or if you're just being selfish. Over time, this can wear you down emotionally, leading to feelings of frustration, isolation, and even self-loathing. This dynamic can be especially harmful for older adults who have a lifetime of memories and emotions tied to family relationships. Being around a toxic family member can also have long-term effects on your mental health. Studies have shown that unhealthy family relationships, especially those based on manipulation or narcissism, can increase stress, anxiety, and depression. The constant push and pull of trying to meet someone else's demands while sacrificing your own well-being is a recipe for emotional burnout. In the case of Claire, I've noticed that her behavior has caused other family members to distance themselves. People are simply tired of the emotional games she plays. This isolation only worsens the situation, as toxic individuals like her often thrive on control and the emotional dependence of others. By cutting out those who no longer play along with their manipulations, they reinforce the toxic cycle. So, why should you avoid spending time with toxic family members like Claire? The emotional toll can be immense. Toxic relationships can undermine your sense of self-worth, making you question your boundaries and your ability to enjoy healthy, fulfilling relationships. Over time, this constant manipulation can erode your happiness and peace of mind, leaving you mentally and emotionally drained. When you're constantly putting someone else's needs ahead of your own, you risk losing yourself. It's important to prioritize your well-being and recognize when a family member's behavior is no longer acceptable. You deserve to be around people who uplift you, support you, and respect your emotional boundaries, not those who manipulate and control you for their own gain. Conclusion. So, as we've seen today, the people we surround ourselves with in our later years can have a huge impact on our well-being, both physically and mentally. It's crucial to recognize when certain relationships are doing more harm than good and take the necessary steps to protect your peace and happiness. Remember, your time and energy are precious. Choose to spend them wisely. Thank you for watching, and if you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave a comment with a 9 if you agree with these points, or a 0 if you think differently. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Take care, and see you in the next video.